Hello and good afternoon.
Arrow, good afternoon to you. Good evening. It's 3 minutes till curfew here in Kyiv, capital of Ukraine.
Wow. So curfew is what, 10 o'clock or 11?
In Kyiv, it's different in every city. In Kyiv, it's 11 o'clock.
I just saw a global newscaster feature you on his news program where you talk about going from Lviv and traveling by train across Ukraine. You've got some guts, dude. Where do you find the courage to do this? Because a lot of people would go the other direction.
Well, I just finished, like 2 weeks ago, I finished about a month-long tour of many parts of Ukraine. Down to Odessa in the south, to Kharkiv, 30 miles from Russia, where there was a missile that hit just a few blocks from my hotel. And so I was pretty exhausted after that trip. I was reporting. We went on humanitarian missions as well, and I was very tired. But we have a Canadian YouTuber that's visiting and wants to see the country. And so I said, okay, I can't just rest in Lviv. There's a lot of work to do. And so, yeah, but it does. I mean, you get used to it. In fact, Arrow, today I was speaking with this Canadian that was here, and anytime you talk with someone who's new here, it's hard to explain what the reality has been like. You just have to feel it. And so my friend asked me, if you're in a city that is really under attack, what do you do when there's an alarm? Like, do you go in the shelter? I said, not anymore. I said, And I hadn't thought about this question. It's not because you don't care. It's after, because for 3 or 4 months, especially at the beginning of the war, every time there was an alarm, you would go into the shelter and you realize you can't live like that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you never get sleep. And so you just, you adapt to it. It doesn't change the risk, but you find a way to live with it. And it's really amazing how humans can adapt. And so it's so you do get an uneasy feeling. In fact, I have an uneasy feeling now because we have we keep hearing reports that the Russians have prepared and for every week for the past almost 2.5 months, there's been a massive infrastructure attack on Ukraine. Tomorrow's Thursday. It's 1 hour until Thursday. This week has been so quiet. We have not had any major attacks. Except for the front lines, with the fighting that's happening on the ground and artillery shelling, we've not had any major attacks since Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And today is tomorrow's the 1st of December. So for 7 days, it's been so quiet with very few air alarms, which is nice, but it makes you feel very uneasy.
Is it because the Russians are waiting for a fresh shipment of weapons?
This is hard to know. I mean, are they getting weapons supplied from North Korea, from China, from Iran? It's possible, but according to a lot of open source intelligence, as of like when I was taking the overnight train 2 days ago from Lviv to Kyiv, very comfortable. The Ukrainian trains are amazing, by the way. They're almost always on time, even in the war. And I have a full bed to myself, and so I wake up in the middle of the night in the train, and I'm looking at my phone, and there's a lot of people can look at open source intelligence and see that Russian air bases and military bases seem to be preparing something. Mm-hmm. There are reports that maybe up to 160 missiles are already loaded up on planes. 160 would be twice as much as the worst attack we've had so far in one day. And it, because Russia has been so unsuccessful on the ground, Ukrainians have pushed back successfully. It seems their best tactic now is to hurt Ukrainian infrastructure as the winter sets in. And, winters are very cold here. I was going around the Kyiv suburbs today in the snow. It's freezing and cold and snowy. And so it seems that Russia's method now is to, attack Ukraine's, heating and electrical grid. And so we're facing the prospect of an extremely difficult winter. But still, people find, Ukrainians are very resilient and people find ways to carry on. But it's going to be a cold, dark winter. There's no other way to say it.
Paint for me a photograph of the reality of the moment of now in the way that we can all see it as well as feel it. And I think that's one thing that we need to do is we need to start feeling the impact on the world and not just one certain area.
I was in the suburbs of Kyiv, which I think we've all seen, hopefully all seen the photos and images of Bucha and Irpin, these little cities just outside the city limits of Kyiv, which the Russians controlled in the early weeks of the war, when the tanks were right on the edge of the Ukrainian capital. And I went to visit them today because the famous graffiti artist, the mysterious Banksy, he painted some graffiti art, and we wanted to go look at it. And in doing so, we met and talked with a lot of people. And so I'm standing amid these apartment blocks, like Soviet, 12-story Soviet-era apartment blocks. And some of these buildings on the side, there's no wall. So you can look and see into people's houses as they were on February 24th, February 25th of this year. Everything frozen in time. I saw a bookshelf. I saw a kitchen table teetering on the edge, 8 stories up. And even though half of these buildings are destroyed, some people still live there. And there was a group of women. They were standing outside, and they were having some schnapps and some pizza, standing outside. And we started to talk to them, and they were caught by surprise in the first few days of the war. They had to go into shelter. They were hiding for 5 days, terrified that the Russians would find them. Fortunately, they were able to escape. One woman, she escaped to Europe. She was a refugee, I think, in Germany. For a few months, and she came back, Arrow. Like she was taken care of in Germany, and there's no war there. She came back as soon as her town was liberated. She came back, and even though half of her building was destroyed, she still lives in that building. And she said, before the war, she said so many of us had dreams of moving to America, moving to Europe, and she said now, no. She said, I only want to live in this country because it's the greatest country. And so there's this, and you look around us, not only we're freezing and there's no heat, but we're surrounded by bombed out buildings. And to see, when she said that, the girl who was one of our guides was crying. It was so cold, the tears were frozen on her face. But it's just an inspiring viewpoint. And I think, when I talk with so many of the Americans who come here, they say, I feel happier here. I think it's because of the spirit. And so, yes, it's homelessness, technically, but there's a sense of home, a sense of belonging that is ever more palpable.
We had a guest at Harris Teeter the other day, and he was fresh from Ukraine, and he's a U.S. soldier, and he's retired, but he's going back to Ukraine because he's trying to help out. I just love stories like this that they're there, but it's requiring those that have left our U.S. military in order to have that presence there.
Yeah, well, MC, I have. So this, I guess, because I love your Harris Teeter story. So this guy was probably checking out at Harris Teeter, and how did Ukraine come up? I mean, you have a way of getting people to tell their stories.
Well, we were talking about Thanksgiving, and he looked at me and he goes, "You don't know what being thankful is all about." And he goes, "I just got back from Ukraine," and I went, "Oh, you're right. I don't know what being thankful is all about," and that's where it all starts, Guy.
Yeah, and I think probably the way he said that, I don't think he probably meant to put you down. I think he was probably just desperate for someone to share the story.
Yes, absolutely.
And he just wanted a way to connect, because when you're always, I hear that story from so many people that when they leave here for a while, no one can relate, and that's why they come back. And even look at like the actor Sean Penn, who's been here 5 times, and I think, or something like that. And when people find here purpose and meaning, because you realize that time is limited, which it is for all of us. But you very clearly see that here, and you see good and evil so clearly. There was a video I'll send to you of a Ukrainian soldier, and he made it for his mother. And he said he was trying to tell his mom not to worry. He said, "Don't worry, I'm here with my friends. We're together in the trenches." And he said, "You did not raise me for war. We were not raised to be fighters. You did not raise me for war," which is a great thing. But you raised me to be a man. And what that means is, and I think it's very applicable to maybe our American context. Too often in America, we are so argumentative, so angry. We're kind of raised for fighting and arguing. And what this guy said, we were not raised we were raised for peace. We were raised for a gentle life, like with family in the village. But through that, if if you're raised with good values, no matter what challenge comes your way, you will fight for it. And I think if you have that's why I see such joyful spirit. I mean, I have a friend who a few weeks ago lost his leg fighting for Ukraine because the Russians blew it off. And before the war, he was working for a startup. He was never a warrior. And you can look at it as a shame, but his spirits haven't changed at all. And sort of complete acceptance of it, and even a defiance. And I would say that the Ukrainians have this, and everyone here, the Americans, all the foreigners that come here, they have this, for the most part, this cheerful defiance. And a lot of the Americans, and maybe you saw this with the veteran you met at Harris Teeter, especially with a lot of the Americans that come here, they come here a little bit broken, a little bit angry with the way things have been, especially from the military, and they're searching for some deeper purpose.
Yep. You have to somehow, some way, you've got to get your hands on this past week's CBS Sunday Morning, where they did a feature on the Ukrainian soldiers, where they've given them like new legs, new arms, and that there's a big push for this to happen, and that they still have that urge to fight, but they've got to get their bodies back in action first.
Yeah, I need to find it, because I went in the summer to the main prosthetic hospital in Dnipro, in the east of Ukraine, and it was difficult to see it, because not only they're making prosthetics for soldiers, but also for children.
That's right.
Like the tiny little feet and legs for children who have been maimed in this, and they've created this amazing hospital train that runs from the east to the west several times a week. To try to save these people's lives, and they find a way to. It's when I've gone to difficult situations at the front lines, it's a common question. Sometimes people say it sort of jokingly, like, "Is it better to get killed or to lose a limb?" This is unfortunately a conversation you have as you're going to these places, But now, as I've seen, especially now knowing people who've lost, a limb, it's much better to be alive. And this is where we see the difference of the only way Ukraine wins, and the reason why Ukraine is winning is, and I think the reason why Putin hates Ukraine, Ukraine has a victory mentality. There's no victimhood, not for a second. Like everyone has dark nights, and people help each other with that, but there's no victim mentality. So Russia is a nation of victims. They're like, just like the Germans were, they were a nation of victims in the 1930s. They're like, oh, everything's terrible, we have to blame someone. They blame the Jewish people and others. And the Russians have a victim mentality. They're not happy with their lives. They don't have a free, happy society, and they have to blame someone. And so they blame, in this case, Ukraine, or they blame NATO. But even with this horrible war, even with all the carnage I've seen all around the country, Ukrainians hate the Russians, but they don't go around complaining. They say, we're going to fight, we're going to win, we're going to achieve, and that's a big difference. Not complaining, and I think maybe the essence to have that mentality is maintaining the sense of humor, being able to laugh even in the face of the the worst things.
So how did you react when word got back to you about how Putin is sitting down with the mothers of military men and women? I mean, it seems like a propaganda move.
Yeah, anything that comes out of the Kremlin, I don't trust. I try not even to think about it, because Putin and the Kremlin, I mean, there's a lot of great chess players there, and so they're trying to tug at different strings, and so I don't even put stock in that. And Putin has two primary propaganda tracks, especially when it comes to Americans. He knows he's trying to convince some Americans that Ukraine is actually what Russia really is. So that Ukraine is some kind of corrupt, disgusting, how do you put it? Like decadent, collapsed society, which is exactly what Russia is. Russia is like there's Putin, there's the government, and there's nothing else. People don't have anything else to live for. Whereas Ukraine is a place of family and church and culture. But Putin's trying to convince Americans that that what his country is what Ukraine is, and then his other propaganda approach for those who do believe in Ukraine and those who support Ukraine, he's trying to scare them with the nuclear fears. And these are very effective. I mean, I do see this working quite well in the States. But when he spoke with the mothers, it's hard to know. I mean, were the actors are real? It's hard to know. But it's nonsense because why?
Tomorrow I'm going to be with a 12-year-old from Ukraine who escaped Ukraine, and she's in Ireland now, and she has a book. Her name I'm not going to get it right, and not until I talk to her tomorrow. Yeva Skalalatska, and the name of the book is "You Don't Know What War Is," and what it is, it's her journal. It's her. When she went into the basement when the country came under attack. We're going to start seeing a lot more of this, aren't we, Joe? Where the people of Ukraine have got to get the real, authentic photograph out here, just like you do.
Yeah, and it's a very artistic and creative society, especially since the revolution of 2014, when they freed themselves from Putin's control for these past 8 years. And so Ukrainians are poetic people. And so I think that we're necessarily going to see a lot of amazing stories come out of this. And that when you interview her, before that, I'll send you. There's a new song released by Irish musician Glenn Hansard. He made the movie once. It's called "Take Heart," and it's in honor of Ukraine. And I'll send it to you before you speak with us.
Please do.
He was writing it
inspired
by the Ukrainian refugees in Ireland.
Well, you use the word refugee, and one of the things I got a note from them today, and they go just an inside, and they go, you can use the word refugee, but just know that it bothers us deeply. And they said, but you can ask us why it bothers us deeply. So what have you heard on the streets in Ukraine? Why is the word refugee such a negative?
Well, it's exactly why, like in the story I told you from the woman in the city of Borodyansk, just outside of Kyiv, she left Ukraine for April and May when her city was being when the Russians were controlling her city, but she didn't want to stay in Germany. She wasn't because I think there's a perception, especially in Europe, a lot of refugees leave their country. Like if you leave Syria or you leave Afghanistan, never wanting to go back because the country's so terrible. And Ukrainians say their country's different. Their country is, Ukrainians are united. They built they have differences, but they've built a country that they like to live in, and they want to go home. They don't want to be permanent refugees, and so that's why they don't like that word. I mean, they're temporarily displaced, but they don't. They're not looking to take benefits and stick around forever in other countries. In fact, a lot of them say, and several friends have told me that everyone has complaints about where you live, and there's plenty of problems that were here. And so they were complaining always about Ukraine. But then when they went to go live in France or Germany or other countries, they said, "Oh, this is a lifestyle not suited for us. We miss our country. We want to go home."
What is it like on your side? Let's flip-flop a little bit here in the way that what do Ukrainians as well as Americans in Ukraine see when you keep hearing about these mass shootings in America? And now there are travel agencies that are saying don't go to America.
Well, it's for example, today I was traveling through devastated suburbs of Kyiv, and even though it's freezing cold and there's snow coming down, I can hear hammers in the distance. People are rebuilding now that the cities are, the Russians are gone from those cities. But as I looked around me, I felt at times that I was in Baltimore, because some of the worst neighborhoods of Baltimore completely collapsed. But what you don't hear in those neighborhoods is the hammer. You don't hear the rebuilding. And I think it's hard for Ukrainians really to realize this. They still look at America as sort of the promised land. They did before the war, at least. But for so many of the Americans that come here, they're tired of all that. They recognize that there's a problem with our culture that makes us so violent, and not just by shooting each other, but by always, attacking each other. And and that's why so many people come here seeking. They come here and they find they're happier when they're here in a wartime. And the streets of like Kharkiv, 30 miles from Russia, as long as there's no air alarm, are safer than walking most American cities. And there's not even street lights. So I can walk with confidence with no street lights through Ukraine's second biggest city. It has much less people now because of the war. But I'm not going to get robbed, or nothing bad's going to happen. Right. And I wouldn't do that in Chicago or New York,
So you don't look over your shoulder?
No. Yeah. And so this is the difference. We have there's a society of trust, and I think we have to, analyze. America. I think the big problem in America is social isolation, and that's where you get the mass shootings. Every single, I think we can safely say every single mass shooter. They could get guns easily, but also they were isolated from society. There wasn't a village mentality, and they had crazy, bad situations growing up, and how often are those people exposed to something true and good and beautiful? And this is what we see, I think, so much with Russian culture. It's a bleak culture, so full of so much hateful rhetoric, and that's going to create hateful people. And this is where we go to victory mentality versus victim mentality. If you're a victim and you keep being a victim and you let that overtake your mind, then the only thing you can do is to victimize someone else.
Yep.
But if you have a victory mentality, you want other people to come with you in the victory. You have a son of your disposition, and this is the key, is to have a victory mentality and not a victim mentality.
One of the most inspirational things that I pick up all the time from Ukraine is that when the lights do go out, the candles come out, and then it's business as usual.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that, especially in Lviv. People in Lviv, it's a very medieval city, so they like to live that way anyway. And it's cheerful as possible. And I was talking with clerks all over the country in shops when they lose internet and power. They have a logbook and they keep IOUs, and they're confident that people will come back and pay. And it's inspiring. It's amazing in a country this big too. It's the largest country totally within Europe, but to have this widespread trust and cheerfulness, it's a refusal to be a victim and say, you know what, we're going to enjoy this. It looks better with candles. Who needs the electricity?
In doing my research for Yiva for tomorrow, one of the things that really opened up my eyes that we've never really touched base on is that once the war began, nobody's talking about how expensive everything became.
In America or everywhere. Eh?
Oh yeah, in Ukraine, she talks about that, how the price of food, the price of anything was really starting to increase.
Yeah, because before February 24th. Before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine did not have the same inflation problems that you saw in America, like with the groceries and all that.
Right.
It wasn't a problem. I think there's a lot of things that were locally sourced, but yeah, with the war, it's become difficult. At first, it was very difficult to get a lot of supplies and things you had to import. It's hard to move things around the country. You also had a problem where so many people left the east, and so they go to cities like Uzhhorod and Lviv. And these cities get overwhelmed, so the rent goes up. That was very difficult, and then couple that with a lot of people, you lose your livelihood. It's hard to keep a business going. With the shorter hours, maybe your business was bombed, and even the Ukrainians, who work in the IT companies. I mean, I go to any coffee shop in Kyiv, and it's filled with people on their laptops. When they're going to a place where they can get power, running their IT business. But unfortunately, a lot of people, in the West and in America are afraid of hiring Ukrainians, because they're afraid, oh, it's war, maybe, it's an unreliable person to hire. But what they don't realize is probably the best person you can hire, because they can't be lazy. They can't give up for 1 second. It's going to be the best contractor you could ever have, because they have every motivation in the world to excel, because they have no other opportunity.
Joe, they're working here in the United States, and then they come to Harris Teeter and they use Western Union to send that money back home. I've seen it. I see it every single week.
Well, yeah, that's because that's where their heart is, and that's yeah. And I think for even all the Ukrainians who are outside of the country, everyone is, there's so many different front lines, and it's, there's not just a front line of battle. It's everyone contributing to make victory possible. And then I think what people, not only in Ukraine, but also especially in Poland and the Baltic countries, but also some other people around the world, this is not just about Ukraine, because if Ukraine falls, Russia now controls. And this would never happen, because Ukrainians would never surrender. There'd be an amazing resistance. But Russia would control the largest country totally within Europe. They would control so many natural resources, semiconductor supply chain. Russia would be so powerful, they could take over more countries. Mm-hmm. And other people recognize it. So it's, and that's why it's not just Ukrainians supporting Ukraine. So people, we had a few months ago there, I think I forget what part of America, but there's a woman with 5 children, and her children went out to their neighborhood, and they raised enough money to buy 1 helmet for Ukrainian soldiers. And so, every little step like that is a fight of good versus evil, of the free world against the tyrannical world. And we see now too, I'm sure you see what's happening in Iran, in China, and it's not just Ukraine. They're free people struggling, for their liberty and dignity all over the world right now.
Joe, and, the soccer team is afraid of going home because they didn't sing the Iranian national anthem. They're horrified to go home.
Yeah, and did you see that when Iran lost the United States, people in Iran erupted into cheers. They were so happy. Yep. That their country lost, and one guy honked his horn and the police shot him. And when I saw that, it reminds me of what happened in 2014 in Ukraine, when the Ukrainians stood up to the pro-Putin regime and the secret police shot them. And usually when the police start shooting, the people go home. But in Ukraine, they didn't, and that's why this war is happening, because they refuse to go home. And so there's a high price, and we see this now happening in Iran. We'll see what the Chinese people are able to do, but it's unfortunate. Why does it have to? Why can't people? Why do we have to have people in power who are so afraid of freedom?
Yeah. Tomorrow, another one of my guests is going to be Bill O'Reilly. And one of the questions that I want to do is that Bill is known for doing a lot of books on history and about political leaders and stuff like that. I'm going to physically have the courage to ask him, what about a book of history moving forward? How about a Bill O'Reilly book about Zelensky?
Yeah, ask him. And I'm curious, because a lot of, Bill was a former colleague of mine. And I don't know if you could ask if he remembers me or not.
I'll do it. What's he going to tell me? What's he going to tell me?
Well, I think he's much freer now, especially since he left Fox News. He's got his own media apparatus, and he's a free guy. And we used to go to Yankee games with Roger Ailes. God. And ask him and actually tell him, if you don't mind, that I'm in Ukraine reporting here, because I was having this conversation today. For some reason, so many of the Americans who talk about freedom, like Tucker Carlson, who kind of took over Bill's slot at Fox, they don't like Ukraine. But if they really paid attention, they would see that these are the freest people in the world. Ukrainians, even in wartime, they argue, they talk about the government. They can't be controlled. And so people, I think Bill would appreciate that about the Ukrainian people. And so I hope you do ask him about Zelensky's
I'm
book.
going to, because
Yeah.
you know me. I'm always going to go and try to get the conversation that nobody else got, and I think that's going to open up a door like you wouldn't believe.
Well, yeah. So tell him I said hello, and I haven't seen him since Yankee Stadium when I was there with Roger Ailes. And let him know that tell him I said hello from Ukraine. And I'm very curious to know. I mean, I think that he would stand with Ukraine. I don't know. So I'm curious. I can't wait to listen to that episode.
Absolutely. All right. Now, so where can people support you and give you guys a lot of love over there? Because I know you've got a website where people can donate money.
Yeah, if you go to UkrainianFreedomNews.com, you can find all our videos and stories. And we welcome, any donations are welcome to keep our media. It's all volunteer. Our media operations going, and then whenever we hear of urgent needs for soldiers in hospitals, we do everything we can to get them what they need. So UkrainianFreedomNews.com.
All right, man. We got to do this again over and over and over again until you get back home to your mom and dad.
I know, Aaron. Sorry I was absent. I mean, it was I don't know. I think I needed a break the past week. But,
I get it, man.
We've been in this weird time with no alarms, and it plays tricks with your mind. So I'm glad we talked today.
Well, we're always thinking about you, dude.
Okay, thank you, Arrow.
All right.
I would look forward to talk to you soon.